Must respond.
Okay, good evening, Gideon. So Sunday we did 100, 99, right? 99, 100, and 102, right? Oh, no, sorry, first class we did 98, 99. Then on Sunday we did 100, 101, 102. And today I hope to do 102, 103, right? 102 we did already.
Yeah.
I hope to do 103, 104, 105 we're not doing because we already did that in the first test. And then 106 as well. Hope to be able to get 10 as well. And if things move along, maybe even 106. Not difficult, it's just a lot of material to cover. Good evening. Then probably tomorrow night, 7, 108, 109, 110, no, 110, and that's our CHAZZARAH. And then the next following Sunday we'll get to Malicha. Okay, so let's begin. Kuf Gimel, chapter 103, Din Nosim Tam of Gam, the law of flavor that is detrimental. Boys, I am sitting, and this includes 7 subsections. Kol Dover Shatame Pogum, anything whose flavor is detrimental, Eino Oise Taravosai will not prohibit that which it's mixed into. Even if the non-kosher food in and of itself is not of a detrimental flavor, on its own, if it were eaten, it would taste good and perfect. But in interacting with the kosher food, it gives off a negative flavor. Mutter is permitted, meaning it doesn't prohibit. No, it doesn't have to be sour or rotten to get the exemption of Nosim Tam of Gam, even if it itself is totally tasty. But in its mixture with the other thing, it gives a bad taste. Then there too, you have the heter, you have the permissibility of Nosim Tam of Gam. Says the Ramah, Miyu, however, those things that are important, as you learned last Sunday, Keberia, like a complete living thing, and it's of its own right, as we explained, but Yotzib that are like a Chaticha or a Skabed, Im Ein Pogim Machras Atzman, but Atzman, if they themselves aren't rotten, they are tasty. Even though they will give a negative flavor to the kosher food they're mixed into, they aren't nullified even in 1,000, because those things are important. So it's not a question of Nosim Tam of Gam, it's a question of their importance. And because they're important, they're not nullified, even if they happen to give off a bad flavor to that thing. But if they themselves are spoiled, then they're already not going to give off anything. They lost their chashivos. They don't have that chashivos element anymore, so they will not prohibit the thing they're mixed into. Base. When we say detrimental flavor, it doesn't have to be completely detrimental. To the point that it's revolting to eat it. Even if it ruins the flavor a little bit. Will not prohibit that which it's mixed into. That's opening line. Now, there are those that limit this leniency. Namely, there are those that say, this is specifically if there's a little bit of prohibited stuff, with lots of kosher, then we'll say that when there's a little bit of flavor, when there's a little bit of negative flavor, that's enough to say that it's not nullified. But if it's a lot of prohibited in a little bit of permitted, even if it's even 50 kosher, 50 non-kosher, then we will not apply the leniency of negative flavor is permitted until such point that it's totally rotten, that it's not edible. So according, sorry,
there's an overwhelming amount of
right. So opinion 1 says, so long as it gives some detrimental flavor, it's totally fine. Opinion 2 says, you have to have either it's so distasteful that it's completely inedible, then I don't care what the ratio is, it's permitted. If the ratio is such that it's 50-50 kosher, non-kosher, or majority non-kosher, then I could say, no, sorry, if there is majority non-kosher, then even a little bit of
majority kosher and
sorry, I guess the other way around. Sorry. If the majority is kosher and the minority is non-kosher, then I could say even a little bit of detrimental is enough to make it permitted. Okay. The main shema marsha shul.
Deteriorates the taste in a small way.
That's enough, but that's only if
There's an
overwhelming amount of kosher. Correct. But if there's an overwhelming amount, but if it's the other way around, where it's 50-50, or there's more non-kosher, then you'll have to have extreme detrimental to the point of inedible. Now, if you don't have any substance left of the actual non-kosher, shall isser that which is prohibited. Now, time above, all you're left with is the flavor. Even if you have a lot of non-kosher and a little bit of kosher, for example, a big non-kosher piece of meat fell into a small stew, and then you pulled out that non-kosher meat. So all you're left with is the flavor of the non-kosher meat. Then here too, in poigim tzas, if it's a little bit detrimental because you don't have the substance, it's just a flavor issue. And mutter and poigim tzas, it's permitted if it gives a little bit of detrimental flavor. Because here too, it's a question of tam kicker, and the tam is no longer faithful to the acre. So it's totally fine. But when you have the actual substance and it's overwhelming, then this opinion would say you have to have really bad flavor. Okay. There's those that sharply disagree. And
that means you would be able to eat even that piece of meat, like in your example?
no, that piece of meat's non-kosher, throw it out.
So
The stew that's left
you
behind.
said that if you had a large amount of permissible, right? You're saying if there's a large amount of permissible, that makes it.
In this last case, you have a lot of prohibited. You have a lot of isser, but it's only flavor because you extracted a piece of meat already. So it's flavor of a large piece of meat into a minority of kosher. In that case, because you don't have the substance of the actual non-kosher, it's just flavor, even a little bit of detriment is okay.
Yeah.
Even according to the second view, that would be more stringent in that case, if the actual substance was still there. There are those that go in more restringent, Leimar to say, if thanks to the non-kosher, the volume of the kosher has now been increased. Such that the increase in volume raises the value of the food, the goydel in its increased volume, in that which it's ruining because of the loss of flavor. So if the loss of flavor ruins this soup by $2, and the volume you added raises it by $3,
can't have it.
So then you can't have it. So even if the flavor isn't faithful, but you're gaining from the flavor, even if it's detrimental, because if detrimental flavor lost you $2, but you gained $3 by the volume, then then it would be prohibited unless it is completely inedible.
How do you possibly quantify this?
The value?
Yeah.
Well, you go to a steakhouse, a fancy restaurant, and you ask them if this were a little off, how much can you sell it for? I don't know, it doesn't really work.
No, I'm trying to. I just don't
No
see.
idea.
Okay.
You know what? Actually, you can ask the butcher shops when they sell on special and what they sell on special.
Oh.
And how much they go on special for meat. It's about to go. It's about to be
The
spoiled
turn,
tomorrow
the
morning.
southern browning and stuff.
Exactly. The medvar mamorim, the wine stores notoriously do that, so there you can measure it too. But medvar mamorim. So when is this true? That in general, the whole entire permissibility of negative flavor is only true if the negative flavor is there from beginning to the end. But if in the first instance it gives a positive flavor and now everything becomes not kosher, even though later it's causing negative flavor, but because at the beginning it gave positive flavor and made it non-kosher, it's going to remain non-kosher, notwithstanding the fact that later the flavor happens to be negative. In poigim l'b'soif, and likewise, or for example, poigim l'b'soif hashbiach, at the beginning, it's detrimental. And at that point, it would have been kosher if it was detrimental, as the Shach points out. But in the end, it becomes, well, the difference is that in the second case, where at the beginning it's detrimental. At that point, it would be kosher. Later, when it becomes positive, now it became not kosher. In the first instance, where it starts out positive, it doesn't become kosher because later it became negative. Because at the beginning it was positive and it made the rest non-kosher, remains non-kosher. But in the reverse, where at the beginning goes negative, at that point it's totally kosher, as Shach says. But later it becomes positive, so now it becomes non-kosher. Also, it's forbidden. Okay. Says Ramah, those that say Afagav de Isser. Noisim tam of gam, even in a case where the prohibited item gives a negative flavor, and the food is totally kosher, as we just finished saying, the pot is forbidden. The pot's forbidden. We spoke about this. We don't cook in we don't cook in noisim tam of gam lechatchila. So even a pot that's over ben yoima, you don't lechatchila go and cook in it. You have to kosherize it. So here too, you have to kosherize it. But here it's more than that. It's possible that only in the interaction of these two pieces of these two flavors, it's negative.
Mhm.
But when it goes into the wall and interacts with a different food, it's going to be positive for all we know.
Right.
And therefore, in if later within 24 hours, so it hasn't gotten negative because of the time passage, it's still positive. It just happened to be negative in the first stew. But now, 6 hours later, you do a new stew, and in that stew, Issar addition, at the original prohibition, gives a positive flavor. The second stew is now non-kosher. So the first stew was kosher because it interacted and created a negative flavor. 6 hours later, a second stew, that stew is totally all around. The first stew was totally not kosher because it created a positive flavor.
Mm-hmm.
No. First stew was negative flavor, totally kosher. Second stew, non-kosher because it was a positive flavor. Yeah. Unless you have, of course, 60 against the original amount of the prohibition. Now, what happens with this? The first stew, which had negative interaction, which we said the pot may still remain positivity for the next stew, but right now it's negative interaction. And now I put a ladle in there. Now I took that ladle and put it into a different pot. Shugam came poigim. And there it's also negative. So 2 pots. One pot has non-kosher flavor that's negative and therefore it's kosher. Stick my ladle in, take it out, put it into another kosher pot, and in that kosher pot, the non-kosher flavor is also negative. Like over there, the pot is kosher. The first pot is not kosher because perhaps it has a positive flavor for the next stew. But the next pot, even though it might have a positive flavor for the next stew, that pot's still kosher. Why? It's not bar not.
Oh.
Right? It's non-kosher to ladle to second stew to second pot.
Right.
Okay. Likewise, something which doesn't give flavor at all, not negative nor positive, it's just neutral, or it's not neutral. It doesn't give any flavor, period. For example, hadvash, one of those big, huge pots in which they boil up the honey. Even though there might be pieces of bees' legs stuck in the honey, like the pot is not prohibited because it doesn't give any flavor, not positive nor negative. It's not a barrier, it's bottle and all the rest of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a barrier because it's not complete. B, it's only a leg. Anything similar to that. Even if the piece of non-kosher itself would be totally positive in its interaction with the kosher, but there's some other thing there. And that other thing makes the non-kosher thing a negative flavor. For example, the non-kosher flavor fall into a stew that has salt or tavlin or some other meduchin or some other ground up spices. And were this stew not to have salt and pepper, shabah in it, the non-kosher wouldn't cause it to be negative. Let's just say wine in your meat would have been a great reduction. So the non-kosher wine would have been positive flavor with the meat.
Yeah.
But because you put Montreal steak spice on your meat, now for whatever reason the wine reduction doesn't give a good flavor. I feel hakim with here too, it's still kosher. So it doesn't make a difference how the negative flavor comes about. So long as the flavor is negative, we apply the leniency. Honey and oil that comes from non-Jews, even though they're cooked, and maybe they cook them in their meat pots, which are non-kosher. We're talking about permitted. Why? Because meat is not good for oil or honey, and therefore the flavor that it might absorb from the pots that they're using to cook it is a negative flavor.
What about today?
So I was just going to say, to remind you that we learned in our classes, that today we don't really apply a lot of these standards because Today they extract things from different random foods and use them as preservatives or use them as this and that, and they end up causing positive flavors, not negative flavors. So it's possible that they take an enzyme from the meat and put it into honey, and it's a preservative, and now it's great, even though here it says it's no good.
Mm-hmm.
So today these standards.
I was about to say pretty much
I
every
just made that up.
the standard of cooking.
But it's possible
is
with gelatin,
oil-
for example.
Oil and steak is the standard. Is like same. If you go to any like
Yep.
fancy like I'm saying like
They use olive oil.
It's olive oil with like where they put spices in it. Like but it's oil. It's oil on
Yeah,
a
so
pan. It's how you pan.
We don't know we addressed that it doesn't know that most of these
Yeah.
things don't apply today.
Right.
Okay. Yesh ever those that sorry.
It's just the general, Tam Nifkam and.
Correct.
Tam Nifkam.
But these are things that Chachamim spoke about at the time.
There are Tam Nifkam, that in our day it's not Tam, it's Tam
Correct.
Nifkam.
Because of the way they produce things is differently correct.
Right.
Okay, Yeshem, there are more continues. Yeshem are those that say that Basar in the Pogim Dvash Atzmai, that when the Chachamim said that meat ruins the flavor of honey, it wasn't referring to honey itself, like Mashka Nasim Dvash, but it's rather some sort of liquid that is extracted from honey. I don't know what that is, but maybe someone knows what it is. Did we speak about it at the time, that honey liquid? I don't remember. We spoke about it. And if there's no great loss, would be stringent, that meat does give negative flavor to honey, unless there's a great loss, and you can rely on the leniency. Say, no, it's only the liquid honey that the meat causes negative flavor to. Basar b'yayin, meat and milk in wine, havalav gam is of a negative flavor, mutter and permitted. I don't think that's true of wine and meat. I think it's meat and wine.
Right.
Wine and meat is good. People use it all the time. Like the other way around.
I would not want my steak
Wine.
sitting in my wine barrel.
You don't want your wine meat flavored. You don't mind if your meat is wine
exactly.
flavored. Yes. Hey, kol kadesh basyoima, any pot that hasn't been used in the last that isn't considered of a day, we'll qualify that in a minute. Tam of gam, its flavor is negative. This is the ubiquitously used head there. When was the last time you used the pot, right? That's what we always ask. This is the source. They know he said it, and if it won't prohibit the thing it's cooking with. In a knas basyoima, it's considered of a day, calls man shalai mes less, so long as it hasn't passed 24 hours. After the prohibited thing was cooked in it. Once 24 hours has passed since the non-kosher was cooked in it, it's no longer called of a day. Therefore, if you cooked anything after that 24-hour period, the stew that you're now cooking or whatever you're cooking now is going to be kosher because it's a negative flavor. And this is conditionally that your pot is cleaned, scrubbed out. It doesn't have any residue on the surface. Because if you didn't wash it out, it will prohibit the next thing you're cooking in. It's like a piece of meat that didn't, or a piece of non-kosher that didn't go sour. But those that are lenient, even if you cooked in that pot before it was rinsed out, after 24 hours. Says that if you have 60 to the ratio of the little bit of residue left, then everybody agrees that it's totally kosher. Considering the fact that the pot itself is over 24 hours and that residue is null, so the flavor in the pot is nullified because it's negative, and the residue is nullified because it's 60 to the ratio, everybody's going to say it's okay. And this is indeed the common practice. Vav. Yesh mishoim, there are those that say if you put spices into a pot that's over 24 hours, so it's negative flavor, but you added that spice, everything now is going to become prohibited. Because the sharpness of the spice will reinvigorate the negative flavor. We spoke about this in previous Simanim as well.
The positive flavor.
We'll reinvigorate the negative flavor to turn it negative. Sorry, we'll reinvigorate the negative flavor to make it positive. Yes. Yeah. Zayin, now when it comes to basar b'chalav, we have another issue, which is at what point did it become non-kosher? Right? It doesn't become non-kosher when the meat's there. It doesn't become non-kosher when the milk is there. It becomes non-kosher in the mixture. And the mixture becomes chanan. So now let's apply that to our case. A pot that has absorbed both milk and meat, that was cooked at the same time. Or one time after the other. Now, the kodim shor laila, before the night passed, not 24 hours. Here we're going with the opinion that says night, because there's a machlekes, remember, in Rishonim, whether Bas Yom was 24 hours or the next morning. So here we're going to go with the more lenient view, considering that we're applying a stringency.
Right.
Whenever we apply a stringency,
No, two
two
stringency.
stringency will eat to a
Yeah.
leniency. So we're going with the more lenient view here, which is overnight, and we're applying now a stringency of Hanan, as we'll see.
Right.
So after the night passed,
First before that.
before the night passed. I'm sorry, thank you. Before the night passed, and now you boiled up water. So that water absorbed both milk and meat, and the milk and meat is of a positive flavor now interacting in that water. So the water becomes Hanan.
Yeah.
So Chashiv so now you got to wait 24 hours after the water was boiled.
Right.
Because that water is Hanan.
Mhm.
That makes your pot restart its clock of absorbing non-kosher.
Right.
Now it says that but a night passed. So according to some opinions, it's already negative flavor anyway.
Mhm.
Then mutter, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And you only have to count 24 hours from when the original mixture of milk and meat, not with the water that came later.
In other words, the water was cooked in the morning.
The water was cooked in the morning.
Like in the evening,
So at least according to some
in
opinions,
the afternoon.
yesterday afternoon,
You cooked milk and meat.
right, yesterday afternoon, milk and
Then
meat.
you cook- Next morning you pick water.
Next morning, water.
And count 24 from the water because the night passed.
You count 24 hours from the milk and meat of the afternoon before, not from the water, because according to some opinions, anyways, Levgam.
Right.
Okay,
Only because the water is in the second day.
correct. It's after the morning. Likewise, if a night passed between the milk and the meat, so meat at night, milk in the morning, or meat in the afternoon, milk in the morning. Even though right after you had that milk in the morning, you boil a bottle of water. The law here too is that it is considered livgam because there's been a 24-hour gap, and Hanan has to happen within those 24 hours. Sorry, it was an overnight gap, and Hanan has to happen before the night gap.
Right.
For Hanan to take place, it's within the 12-hour gap.
So you're waiting since.
Within the overnight gap,
milk
sorry.
was cooked or since the water was cooked.
In this case, you'll wait 24 hours from when the milk was cooked,
And not when the water.
not when the water was
No.
cooked.
It's because the water was cooked in the morning. Because the water was cooked
Because
at
the
night.
water didn't get Hanan
Right.
properly from the milk and meat, because the milk and meat was overnight from each other.
But if we cooked the water at night before the night was over, then you could say that the
Then
water
you
becomes
count-
Hanan and then restart the 24-hour clock.
Correct.
From that.
If the milk and meat was
You
before
have
it.
the milk in the pan.
I'm saying you cook
The
milk
milk
and
and
meat
meat
in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
That we said.
Yes,
Then,
correct.
if you cook that night before the night's over, that dinner time you cook water in it,
You
then it
do
would restart the
even
24-hour
better.
clock.
You have milk and meat at 6 p.m. in the afternoon,
Right.
and then you do water at 2 a.m. before sunrise.
Mhm.
Your clock starts from 2 a.m.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it didn't pass to the next day.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to-
Now back to the original chumrah of the original chumrah that if it's before overnight, we apply Hanan to the water and start the clock from there if it's before overnight. So it says that the same thing would apply to every other Yisordim. Based on what we learn, we are of the view that b'chol Yisordim, of all Yisordim, we say we say Hanan, which means like this: you have non-kosher food cooked in the afternoon, 2 a.m. you boil water, clock starts from 2 a.m. because if water was boiled before overnight,
Yeah.
according to us, that's Hanan by other Yisordim, the clock starts from that water.
Yeah.
Okay. Violence sits on the base. See earlier, chapter 92, where we discuss at length the whole machlekes of Hanan. But Malcolm have said, if there's a loss, even a small loss, as the Shach points out, you can be lenient in this case, b'shari Yisordim and other Yisordim. In any regard, which means rak shema masles misman bishla iser, and therefore your clock goes back to when the non-kosher was actually cooked. Any small loss, right? And it's because we're applying two stringencies. We're applying the stringency that the 24 hours is that Bas Yom is 24 hours rather than the next morning. Plus, we're applying the stringency of Hanan of Shari Yisordim. And therefore, if there's any loss, lenient. Kuf Dal 104. Yeah, clear?
Right.
Kuf Dal 104. Achbera, the Dabra, a rat or an achbara, whatever we discussed what
Right.
exactly the identification of it is a squirrel, it's a rat, it's something. Achbar, they translate as squirrel here, right? I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So achbar, that's in the wild.
Or other vermin. Squirrel and
Okay, we'll discuss other vermin later in the Siman and as well in Kozayin. So achbara, a achbar, we'll call it that, the davra that comes from the wild. Noisim tam lishvach gives positive flavor. Shara Ela Shulchan Malachim, because apparently it was a delicacy that even the princes would have eaten. I guess they lived out in the wild. They were like I guess like eating rabbit. Achbar the masa, but city achbars, those are more disgusting. It is a doubt. The Gemara is in doubt as to whether or not it will cause a positive flavor to wine and to beer and vinegar, right? Or not. Therefore, the Shach points out that most disagree and say that there's no difference between Akbar of the wild or the of the city. In any case, there's a doubt as to whether or not a pot causes a positive flavor to beer and vinegar. But continues, therefore, if this Akbar falls into beer or vinegar, but and it's cold. This cedar shalom and you extracted it and it was whole. No pieces left behind. If it didn't sit in there for 24 hours and therefore doesn't have kavush, which is one of the first principles we learned, what that's going to be permitted because it didn't have enough time to get any flavor. But if the pot was boiling beer and boiling vinegar, or even if it was cold, the Shabbos and the Akbar stayed in there for 24 hours, and now it's kavush k'mavoshel, whether you extracted it in its entirety, or whether it was cut up into small pieces, and you can strain it out in a strainer, to such a degree that no pieces of the akbar were left behind in this beer or vinegar. Or whether it was completely dissolved. And the whole akbar became a liquefied. And there is no tangible items of the akbar left. Nitar is going to be permitted only if you have 60 to the ratio against the akbar. Otherwise, it will be prohibited because we're not sure does it give positive or negative flavor. If it was cut into small little pieces, and it's such a degree, it's such a manner, it cannot be strained. For example, the beer or the vinegar with these pieces of the akbar got mixed into a thick batter. So now you can't strain it out. Then everything is prohibited. The ain't sham bittul, there's no nullification. Because we're concerned, you might actually end up eating the very non-kosher itself, and you won't even notice. Okay, says the Rama Dafka b'sheretz. This unique din that even when it's cut up so tiny doesn't get bittul is only by a sheretz. Because in most cases we say if it's cut up so tiny, it's permitted. By sheretz, no. Akbar is one of the 7 shrotzim that the 8 shrotzim that the Torah says are impure.
You say that by Beria?
So the sheretz, because the Torah gives us such a small measure of when it becomes also it's kadasha, the size of a barley, it's considered like a beria.
Considered
like a beria. That tiny amount is considered like a beria. Considering that the Torah says that it's that's tummy at that small level. That's how the Taz quotes from the Darkei Moshe explaining the reasoning behind this law.
Where is the case when little pieces are permissible?
We saw before the bee legs. Where you can't find it, you don't see it, you sell them there, it's fine. We're going to learn soon with respect to flies, if it's dissolved or whatever.
You even say like a bird. The problem.
But dissolved is different than
he means tiny little pieces here.
Dissolved and there's small pieces.
Here he means tiny, very, very small pieces.
Even a bird, even if it was a bird, it'd be okay. The problem is it's actually the problem.
If you can identify it, throw it anyway.
No.
You can't identify this book.
Even a bird, you can't identify it. It's mixed in pieces, and you're fine. It's because it's specifically one of these things.
Only because the sheretz.
Correct. It says the akbar, it's not okay.
Because the sheretz, the Torah gave it. Because Torah says it's tummy at such a small level, it gets the law of beria. That's how the Taz explains it.
There's a few other things like this, like that.
There's 8 shots in the Torah says. I'm not sure what they all are, but you can look it up in Vayikra or whatever it is. Hashishmini, I think it is. Right? Sorry?
Ants?
No.
Bugs are okay.
If they're whole, you take them out. We're gonna get to the law of bugs soon.
Yeah.
Okay. So therefore, yesh lachash, in this case, it says that we're going to be concerned if there's a tiny amount, then you can't extract it. But other prohibitions, in lachash, if it's so small, you can't get it out, and it's tiny, it's bottle, it's bottle. It's the whole law of bittul we're learning the entire time. Base. If the aqua falls into wine, oil, or other liquids, before we spoke about vinegar and beer, now it's wine, oil, and other liquids. Then akbar definitely gives negative flavor. It's only the beer or the vinegar that apparently maybe can give a positive flavor to. Everything else, definitely negative. And you don't need 7 to nullify, you don't need 60 to nullify its flavor. Extract the substance, and it's good to go because the flavor is negative.
Just about the
Yeah.
thing that something became liquefied. And we're talking about something that, when we talked about a barrier, we talked about something that cannot be nullified even in 1,000.
Correct?
And now, if we could recognize it in any way, we could always strain it out.
It's always true.
Okay, now, if we couldn't strain it out, then it was totally liquefied, so that it couldn't be identified, then we said it's okay.
Correct.
Be nullified in 1,000. We know that it's in this liquid. How did that become okay?
It's only, so first of all, we already said, 1 second. We said it's only going to become kosher if you have 60 against it. Because maybe it gives a positive flavor.
Yeah.
Ordinarily,
But a barrier that didn't give a positive flavor.
barrier it's not nullified. But if it's liquefied, it's no longer barrier, right?
Right, then it's pieces.
If it's liquefied, barrier is only when it's shalom, when it's whole.
It's whole.
If it's liquefied, it's not a barrier anymore.
But
The derech klal,
but if it got chopped up,
the
That's
barrier,
not a barrier.
No, but it got chopped up. We said that we'll still strain it out.
if you can,
We'll still strain it out.
Always.
And then we'll take the liquid.
correct,
Yeah,
We'll drink the liquid.
correct.
But if we couldn't strain it out,
it's still
Then
fine.
it's totally fine,
It's not a barrier.
and it's fine.
I know it's fine. I just can't understand how.
Why?
Because it's bittul, there's a law of
Yeah.
bittul.
It's not a barrier. It's not a
The piece itself is bottle, and you have 60 to the ratio of the
Yeah.
flavor, or the flavor is negative. You always have to nullify either flavor, or you have to always nullify flavor and item. So the item's either nullified because it's been liquefied or whatever, or we took it out, and the flavor is either nullified by 60 or because the negative flavor.
The item's there.
Okay,
The item's not removed, right?
correct.
The barrier.
If you don't know where it is.
The barrier was a problem when it was a barrier.
If it's not a chaticha or liskabet, you have a strip of meat that's non-kosher mixed in your stir fry. You can't find it. You eat the whole stir fry. This is law bittul. Yeah. Okay.
But it's a thing even in 1,000 can be not be nullified.
Only if it's whole. Once it's straight. Once it's chopped up, it's no
little
longer.
piece.
It's a barrier. It's no longer barrier. Barrier is only a barrier when it's whole. Once it's chopped up, it's no longer a barrier.
Because they blame you. If you let a whole thing fall into your thing, they blame you. You should have been.
Oh, because of the chashivas. Okay,
I know. I'm joking.
okay, base. If the akbar falls into wine or oil, or any other liquids, it's definitely going to cause negative flavor. It's only with respect to beer and vinegar that maybe the akbar gives a positive flavor. And therefore, you don't need 60 to the ratio to nullify its flavor. As long as you extract the item itself, or it's chopped up, liquefied, or whatever, can't get it out, but it's you got rid of the item itself. You don't have 60 against the flavor. It doesn't matter because flavor is nullified by negativity, by pagam. Fizeh says that based on this opinion, we're going to say, even if it falls into kosher fat, the law is the same, that it's going to be nullified as long as you extract the item itself because the flavor is detrimental. But yesh machmirin b'shumon, there are those that are stringent with respect to fat and say, well, actually, maybe it's going to give positive flavor into fat. And there are those, as the Shach tells us, it's specifically wine, oil, honey that have to have this pristine flavor that the akbar will ruin it. But other things, the akbar may not ruin the flavor, especially the shuman, the fat. And therefore, even if when we're looking at it, it's already congealed. And if it's congealed, you can assume that the flavor didn't travel everywhere. And if you only have to take out the crust that's touching the actual akbar, nonetheless, we don't know that. Maybe at the time when the akbar fell in, it was liquefied and it gave positive flavor everywhere. And therefore, if every day you poured a little bit more fat into your pot, and into your pot, and the bottom of the pot you find an akbar, right? Now it's congealed, but you don't know at which point this akbar was there. There's a doubt. Shema akbar hayasham. Perhaps the akbar was there. Love shuman right there when you poured that hot liquefied fat, and it landed on the akbar and became non-kosher. Then I call usher all of the fat is non-kosher. I feel even if you have 60 in the fat against all of the entirety of the akbar. But if you didn't pour anything on top of it, you just found the akbar there, or you poured the fat in there, liquefied, but you know that when you poured liquid in, the akbar was not there. And now we're looking at this pot. It's congealed fat. There's an akbar at the bottom. And I know that when I poured that liquid in, the akbar wasn't there. Or I didn't pour it in at all. It was just sitting there, and now the akbar was in there. So now I have two doubts. Doubt number one, maybe it was always congealed when it interacted with the akbar. Number two, even if it was liquefied at some point, maybe at 60 to the ratio, as we'll see. So it explains. And therefore, likewise, if you find the akbar on top of the congealed fat, not the bottom, all you need to do is take off a finger around the akbar. We don't assume that's non-kosher because shuman rach keshanafasham. The only reason to make it prohibited is to say maybe the fat was liquefied at the time when the akbar fell in there, and the kavosh havakamavushal, and therefore it's sitting in there long enough to become like cooked because it's sitting there long enough. Because you have a double doubt here, and the double doubt makes it kosher. How so? Maybe the akbar fell in and it was hard, and therefore the flavor didn't go everywhere anyway. Unless you say even if the akbar fell in while it was liquefied, while it was, the non-kosher thing fell in there while it was liquefied. Maybe it got congealed before 24 hours when it was enough time for it to become avish k'mavoshim. Now, unrelated din. Now, in a situation where the fat is so disgusting because of the akbar that you can't even eat it, you can't even use it to make light in the shul. The pasuk asks, would you serve such a thing to your ministers? Certainly don't bring it to God. So if the oil is so disgusting you can't even eat it, you can't use it in the shul either, or from a night or anything like that. Okay? For Malcolm have said Gadol, in an instance where there's a very big loss, this we can rely on the lenient opinions which say that akbar actually gives negative flavor to shuman, because all the above was assuming that the akbar gives positive flavor to shuman, to fat, and then we have to have these doubts: was it liquefied? Was it congealed? Was it in there long enough, etc. But in the case of a loss of great money, you can rely on the opinions which say that to begin with, the akbar gives a negative flavor even to the fat, and not just to oil, wine, and honey. Okay, I hope we follow that somewhat.
I'm with that 100%.
Good.
As far as I'm concerned.
Oh, the negative flavor. Yes, that part is
Negative
it.
flavor, I'm with that 100%.
Gimel.
I can't imagine it giving any positive.
Definitely to our modern sensibilities, it's hard to imagine akbar giving positive flavor to anything. But go to China and they might disagree with you. Okay, Gimel. Things that are just repulsive. People are reviled by these things. Like worms, there's vuvim and flies, yatushim and other kinds of flies. She called them beidelman. Let me use son. People stay away from eating these things because they're so repulsive. I feel in this arbatavshal, even if it mixed into a food. The nimcha gufan, and its body has been dissolved into it, so you can't take it out, and it's not a berry anymore. It's already chopped up. As long as you have a majority of kosher, mutardim, you can eat it. You may eat it because it's negative flavor, and the item itself is nullified by either majority, and it's not a berry because it's already cut up. It's already dissolved. Whatever you can possibly check and remove by straining, you should check and strain. But when it comes to beer and wine, perhaps actually it is positive flavor. We spoke about this with respect to whiskeys. That it's possible that flies and worms give positive flavor to whiskeys, as you find worms in agave, or I think it's agave, right? Where do you find worms in cognac? What is it? Where do you find worms? What kind of alcohol? No? Rum? Yeah, the cognac, there's some kind of hard liquor that has worms. Sorry?
Tequila, maybe?
Tequila. Thank you very much. Yeah. So different when it comes to your flies in your whiskey, can't leave them in there long enough for coverage from a bushel, which is going to be faster than 24 hours because of its sharpness. So you got to get the fly out of there quickly. Otherwise, you might have an issue of kosher, non-kosher. We spoke about that where we lived it. Okay.
Because it'll add good flavor.
Because it'll have good flavor. Correct. Okay, skip Kuf 8. Now we're off to Kuvav.
But alcohol doesn't have good flavor, Jenna. Like,
Fancy your ass.
for sure, but I think that it's not like the same type of flavor.
That might be blasphemous in some circles when you say that.
Yes. I feel like it's not, it's like part of the fun of alcohol is that it has a bad flavor.
Give it a few more years. I'm kidding. Okay, okay, Kuvav. Guys, I think we're going to finish before Mincha. This is wonderful. Maybe we can get quick sign and let's see. Kuvav. Din Heit Mevatel B'Shishim, the law of how we measure the ratio of 60, Boy Sifim, and this includes two subsections. This is officially the machlekes of Hanan and how to apply Hanan by other Isim, which of course we discussed in greater length in Tzaddik Beis in 92. Now, Chatich, because 92 was Basar B'Cholav, here is Taruvas, which is other Yisudim. Chaticha v'shabola iser, a piece of meat or something that absorbed non-kosher flavor. And this piece doesn't have 60 times the amount of non-kosher that it absorbed. And now this piece, which is not kosher, you cannot eat it because it absorbed something non-kosher and it hadn't nullified it. This piece, nafal falls into a pot, falls into a stew. And he said as will only prohibit lefi cheshbin proportionally to the amount of iser shaba of prohibited stuff that was inside there. If you have 60 in the pot and you count as part of the 60 the original piece of meat that absorbed non-kosher, if you have 60 in total against the original non-kosher, and you include in the 60 the piece of meat that originally absorbed non-kosher, mutter, everything is okay. Mashva data, everything that's in the pot. Sorry, according to the mechaber. But the piece of meat itself sort of may not be eaten. Because the non-kosher that it absorbed will not exfoliate completely from it. Some of it's still going to stay in there, and therefore, even though that will be part of the 60 to nullify the flavor, but it itself cannot be eaten. This is in contradiction to what he said in 92, and the primary halacha is as the one here.
He's making a clear distinction between Basar B'Cholav and...
No, over there he's also talking about Shari Surim.
Yeah?
It's a famous contradiction. I've tried to explain what the contradiction is, but the bottom line is, even the Spardim follow the way he writes it here in Kuvav, rather than in Tzaddik Beis. Okay, Masha'in came with Tzaddik Beis, he said that even the original piece of meat that absorbed non-kosher you can eat. Because the flavor disperses equally. Here he's saying, no, it can be part of the 60 because it does absorb some flavor, but it absorbs more than the rest, and if I don't eat it. And as we learn the parentheses here, that's the primary way of thinking about it. The loikum which causes Tzaddik Beis, unlike what he wrote in 92, where there he said that even the actual piece itself is kosher. Okay. Now, Ma'ashein came, but by contrast, the dov or hanivla v'nimuch, something which is becomes liquefied. Shim nafal dam okiyotzibai, that if something is blood or something like that falls into a toicher right there, she'll head there into a kosher stew. V'osru, and now the whole kosher stew is prohibited. Machmas mutar because it doesn't have enough; it didn't have 60 to the ratio of the blood. Now afterwards, nisaba right there, she'll head there, and now you have more kosher stew gets in there. To such that you have between everything, the original kosher that absorbed the blood, plus the new kosher, 60 against the original amount of blood. Kulei mutter, everything is kosher. Even the original kosher stew that originally interacted with the blood. Shakal because everything is equally mixed. Why did the Ramah say before you shouldn't? Why did the Machaber say before you shouldn't eat the original piece of meat, even though it's part of the 60, because the flavor didn't disperse equally, it retains more in the original thing. But when it's liquid, the flavor disperses equally, and therefore everything's going to be kosher, even the original kosher that absorbed the blood that would have been non-kosher had the extra not been added. But says Ramah, following our custom that we rule, we say, sorted by all prohibitions. The piece of meat becomes non-kosher itself. Oh wow! I thought it was too late for mincha. It's 8:20. It's raining. Okay. It makes a difference if the original absorbent was either a liquid or a solid. Both of them are going to become chanan, and therefore you're going to have 60 to nullify not just the original non-kosher, but the entire piece or the entire liquid that originally became non-kosher. With the exception of one difference. With the following matter. If the original piece was dry, so non-kosher piece, kosher piece of meat absorbed non-kosher, the yesh samach kenegdoi, and you have 60 against the piece of meat because it became chanan. The non-kosher piece of meat that originally became non-kosher, the sheres bisura remains prohibited. And it must be extracted because it's chanan, right? That original piece is chanan. So you have to have 60 against it, but it has to be extracted because it's chanan. In makira, if you can find it. But if you can't find that piece of meat, the tail is nullified. If it's not early
What's the chiddush? What's the chiddush now?
the chiddush now is that piece of meat, there are more.
We understood that we understood before that the meat.
So first of all, you have to have 60 against it.
What's the chiddush?
The chiddush is you have to have 60 against the original piece of meat.
Yeah.
Of course.
That's the chanan chiddush, which the Machaber said you don't have to have 60 against the original piece of meat.
That's
Okay,
the chiddush.
but now he's
That's what
explaining
I'm saying,
why the meat, the yavish, is different than the lach. He's explaining why yavish is different than lach. By yavish or lach, you'll have to have 60 against the totality of what was originally prohibited, whether it was lach or yavish in the beginning. However, when it comes to yavish, you can extract that piece of meat,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And you have to. And if that original piece of meat was royal iskabet, and you can't find it, all pieces of meat must be thrown out.
Right.
That's royal iskabet.
Yeah.
Machaber's not going to say that, right? Machaber's not going to tell you to do that, but he will say because that original piece is chanan, you cannot eat it, and if you cannot find it, plus it's chatich royal iskabet, take all pieces of meat, throw them out. If it's not royal iskabet, you can't find it, eat them all. But here's the chiddush: if it's the original item was liquefied, and you have to have 60 against not just the non-kosher, but 60 against the original kosher that interacted with the non-kosher, right? How call mutter, everything is okay, even the original liquefaction. Because you have 60 against the ratio of that which was originally prohibited. Unlike the chaticha, where you have to extract the chaticha, here in the case of liquid, you don't have to extract the original liquid. The whole liquid is liquid and all kosher. Even though it's chanan, you have to have 60 against it. Okay, finally, listen to the base of the test. See earlier, chapter 92 and 99. Yeah, with me?
I didn't catch the chiddush. I didn't catch what was different over there.
He's not saying any difference. He's just saying that we apply chanan, and if we have to have 60 to the ratio of the original iser,
Yeah.
but we're still going to agree with the machaber. There's a difference between lach and yavish. And that yavish has to be extracted if you can, and if chaticha or leiskabit, even if you can't extract, you got to get rid of all the pieces. But if it's liquid, I'll agree with the machaber. You can leave it in there. Even though I disagree, and you have to have 60 against the original liquid. That's it.
I'm still saying you need to have 60 against it.
Against the original liquid.
Yeah.
Original,
As opposed to the machaber, which says only 60 against the original iser.
he said against the original issue, but he's saying against the original, but here in both cases, we're talking about liquid.
No, one's yavish, one's
Liquid
lach.
is blood.
The non-kosher is liquid. But what the thing that absorbed it originally,
Right.
to either be a piece of meat or liquid.
Right.
If it's a piece of meat, you have to have 60 to the ratio against that piece of meat, but you got to get that meat out.
Right.
And if that piece of meat is royal iskabed, you can't find it. It's not bottled. You got to get rid of all the royal iskabeds in that stew, right? Now, if the original thing that absorbed the blood was liquid, then you have to have 60 against the original liquid, because chanan, but you don't have to get rid of the original liquid. And that's where I'll agree. You don't have to get rid of the original liquid. It's all become liquefied mixed. And therefore, in that instance, I'll agree with the machaber. That's all that I'm saying.
But
No
it's
major
still
chidushim. It should be
saying-
pretty clear.
It's still saying, look, the Rama still says it becomes Hanan.
Yes, which means you have to have 60 against it.
Yes. The entire
Right?
thing.
Let's remember.
The entire
Let's remember.
the
We
new mixture.
just to remind you from something base.
So we would-
The fact there's two machlokes in. There's a few machlokes in Hanan, but as far as we're concerned, here there's two machlokes in about Hanan. A, there was a Hanan. Does Hanan apply to Shari Sulam? B, does Hanan apply to Lach? There are those that say that Hanan doesn't apply to Lach at all. And over here, you're applying both standards. We're saying Hanan applies to Lach plus Shari Surim. So we're not going to make you throw out the whole thing because you can't strain out the original liquid. Eat the whole thing.
But the Rama says
Right.
the original liquid becomes Hanan, and even if you add more liquid to it, it's not going to change.
You have to have 60 against the
No.
entire original.
No,
In the
the
case.
the
You
original.
can't L'chadchila do so, that's for sure not.
No, but there must because there was the Mechaber's opinion was if after the fact it's accidentally poured in, now your thing becomes kosher.
All of this is only accidental. You can't do
No,
L'chadchila.
I understand. But
Yeah.
the Mechaber is basically saying if you have an accidental mixture, you have blood in your soup, and there's not 60 times the blood,
Yep.
the whole thing's gone. Someone accidentally
But if you
pours
add
in
more
water
soup-
into the thing or milk, whatever it is, and now it's okay.
If 60 against the blood.
Exactly.
And the Rabbi was saying you have to have 60 against the original soup.
Right.
That's all. But it's still kosher. Unlike the piece of meat, we have to take out the Hanan.
Right.
With liquid, you don't have to get rid of the original Hanan. That's all. You can't get rid of the original Hanan. You don't have to get rid of the original Hanan. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Good. Base. Chaticha sheyesh bo chelev, a piece of meat that has non-kosher fat in it.
Mhm.
Attached to it. It's a dovuk we spoke about. Yeah, they're attached non-kosher to
Yeah.
each other. It's bashla b'kadera, and now this got cooked into a kosher stew,
Mhm.
a kosher cholent. Sheyesh bo samach levat lachelev. And you have 60 to the ratio of the non-kosher fat. So everybody in 10 minutes. 8:40. Yeah, we'll finish the siman and we'll go to Mecca. So you have we have a piece of meat that has non-kosher fat. So kosher piece of meat, but they haven't removed the chalev, which you're supposed to remove. So the chalev, non-kosher fat, still attached to the meat. And then this piece of meat with the non-kosher chalev falls into my cholent. So tzarich lizor, be very careful. Don't take anything out of the pot whilst the non-kosher chalev meat is still in there. Why? Because we're concerned. Maybe the non-kosher piece of meat with the chalev is going to stay in there last. And you want to have 60 against the chalev. Now, so maybe then you could think, okay, so I won't take out the other pieces, but I see which piece is the one that has the chalev. I'll take it out.
Mhm.
That is also not a good idea. Don't take out that piece of meat first. Because then it's going to become not kosher. According to the Machaber, that piece of meat can be part of the 60 to nullify it. So if I take it out first, I just ruined a good piece of meat. Because it's not going to have 60 against the chalev that's attached to it. Before, when it was still cold, I could have taken the chalev off and eaten the meat because it's hate. But because now it got cooked into the stew, if I take it out, it's going to absorb directly from the chalev that doesn't have 60. So either I'm ruining the rest of the pot by taking away the 60, or I'm ruining that piece of meat by taking it out and making it interact with the chalev.
That's only for 60. It would be 70, it wouldn't be a problem.
Let's just say, yeah. Well, if it's 70, then maybe you took out too much. Now you're still less than 60.
No, then you could have taken out the piece.
No, then that piece of meat's going to come non-kosher.
But that piece of meat, everybody's agreeing.
That piece of meat is kosher. It's attached to chalev, which is not kosher. But the meat itself is kosher. So if it was still raw, I'd just remove the chalev and then eat their steak as unto hate. Chalev is attached to kosher meat, right? Let's do nicker. I didn't do nicker. Didn't extract it. Okay. But by taking it out now while it's hot, I'm ruining a perfectly good piece of meat by making it absorb from the chalev. If I take it out first. Right? The chalev, it's attached to it, will make it forbidden. So mata kanta, what's the solution here? And leave it until everything cools down, and then you can take out the pieces one by one and get rid of the chalev piece, and everything else can be reheated or served or cold or whatever.
This is if you can't obviously see it. Because if you can clearly see which piece it is, can't
He
you?
said, leave it alone. It's nullified by 60.
Yeah.
You do anything, you're going to ruin the nullification. Either ruin the nullification of the whole pot, or ruin the nullification of that piece that's attached to the chalev. But either way, you're going to ruin the nullification. So leave it alone until it cools down. When there's no longer interacting, mixing.
Fine.
And you take out the one that has chalev and everything else is fine. Yeah? And then the one that you took out, that's cold. But the chalev, cut the chalev off and enjoy the rest of
Right.
it.
That's because it's attached, not absorbed, right?
Correct. That's right.
Okay. And there
It
are
says according to that which we rule that the piece of meat becomes non-kosher. So that piece of meat is not going to be saved anyway by leaving it in there.
Right.
So then take that piece of meat out and everything else is kosher because it's
Right.
60 to ratio. So according to us, you're anyways not saving that piece of meat.
Yeah.
By leaving it there, take it out. According to the Machaber, you could save that piece of meat, let it cool down, and then take the piece of meat out.
That's what we do. We take it out right away.
Yep. Correct, because we're anyways not going to. Yes, we still have time. Kov Zayin. Wow, we're covering a lot of ground. So maybe tomorrow night we'll do Kov Ches, Kov Tes, Kov Yud. Sorry? Okay, Kov Zayin. Everybody with me? Yeah, no, I'm moving very fast.
No, it's okay.
I was saying it's a review, that's why I'm moving quickly. Okay. Dinam Avashal Beitza, didn't over Mios, Hanim Tavashal. The law of cooking eggs, and if something is repulsive that's found in your stew, boy Beisif, and we have two subsections. Aleph, subsection 1. Mavashal Beitzim Arabically Pasan, one who cooks many eggs in their shells. So lo yitzim mayim, don't extract them from the water in which they were boiled. Actually, it's not until the water cools down. Or pour extra cold water in there. Let's sign them to cool down the eggs in the water. Then take the eggs out. Why? Because we're afraid you're going to take all the eggs out, start peeling them, and you're going to find one of them has a bird. And you don't know when that birded egg came out. Did it come out first, last, in the middle? I don't know. And if you were to take all the eggs out while they were still, before they were cold, while they were still hot, maybe that one, which you discovered later has an egg, has a chicken in it, was left behind in the pot in Machrenes with the last 10, let's say. And it would prohibit it because you don't have 60 to the ratio. Because you didn't have 60 left behind. And now there's 10 eggs in your plate, maybe 20, maybe 30, you don't know how many. They're all non-kosher. And therefore, wait till they cool down before you take them out. Said that why also can if you didn't do that? You pour them all out to your plate, and it turns out one of them is a treifa because it's got a chicken there. We would actually say all of it's forbidden. Why? Because we're afraid maybe the treifa one, the one that has the chick, is left behind at the end with the last 10 eggs. And there wasn't 60 to the ratio in the pot, because only 10 there. Lavato to nullify it. Then Nassar, and all 10 eggs became non-kosher. And then these 10 make everything else in the plate non-kosher. So every single thing is non-kosher, perhaps, because of the chanan step in the middle. Continues that Amal likewise, the time sifting to a small fish. A small little piece of sardines. And you find on your plate a non-kosher fish, tiny one. And you dump them all out at once. Onto your plate. Because if you dump them all out into your plate, okay, you dump them all out. But if you took them one by one, maybe again the non-kosher fish stayed behind while you didn't have 60 to the ratio and made chanan and ruined the rest of your plate. There are those that are lenient and say everything's kosher anyway. Because you have 60 to the ratio, leave it alone. We're not going to. We no reason for us to presume that it was left behind without a 60 to the ratio. Right now, 60 to the ratio, mutter. I don't have to start worrying. Maybe at one point there wasn't 60 to the ratio. That's this opinion, which is more lenient. Says this is the lenient opinion, this is the primary opinion. Even according to the more stringent view, we're not going to say that the pot in which it was cooked is non-kosher because we leave pots in their original presumption of kosher. Base. A fly you create in life, that are of these repulsive foods or repulsive things, which people are reviled by them. I find it in my soup. Throw it out. The rest of the soup is kosher. Because the flavor that it gives off are of a negative flavor is detrimental. We spoke about that already before. So this is the common practice, to throw the fly out. Even though there are those that say that the fly has the same law as the akbar and maybe it gives a positive flavor. But we don't go by that one. Because Divya Makil and Ikka, the primary is the lenient view, which says it gives negative flavor, so take it out and eat the rest of the soup. Don't change the custom and be more stringent. Right? Sometimes the Shulchan Aruch says if you want to be stringent, be stringent. Here he says, don't change the custom. Be lenient, throw the fly out, eat the rest of your soup. What happens if you use the spoon to take out the non-kosher fish from your pot? Or you took out a fly with the spoon. No, sorry, fly is nice and pagam. You took out something else, which is not pagam. Also, like zera kafka kaderi, you can't put the spoon back into your soup because the spoon, when it took it out, absorbed the non-kosher flavor without 60 to the ratio. When you had 60 to the ratio in your soup, good. But now in your ladle, you don't have 60 to the ratio. And therefore, and if you put the ladle back in, you have to have 60 again in your pot against the prohibited. But not against the entirety of the ladle, because the ladle doesn't become chanan. Only food becomes chanan, not vessels, not kalim. Das atzma, this is the Ramah's view. We don't say with respect to vessels that become chanan. But if when I ladled out the non-kosher, I also took some soup with it. Now that soup became chanan while it was in the ladle, because it was hanging out in my ladle with non-kosher fish. And I put that ladle back in. You have to have 60 to the ratio against the little bit of soup that was left in the ladle that became chanan while I was extracted together with non-kosher food item.
Right, when you put the spoon in the
Now
side.
exhale. All right, we'll go to Mincha. And good one tomorrow. We'll finish Kuf Ches, Kuf Tes, and Yud.
We do between Mechamar?
Not
Oh,
about
finish.
Kuf Ches, Kuf Tes, and Yud, no way.
No. Do one.
Even Kuf Ches not, because the first sip is very, very large.
You just finished up?
We just finished Kuf Zayin.
Done.
Kuf Ches, the first sip of Kuf Ches is very large. So we'll finish it. We'll do it tomorrow, God willing. Hopefully. Sorry? The Rabbi's own view. So in the parentheses, they're putting the sources. So in this case, they're saying it's his own view. Other times, I'll tell you it's from this one, from that one, wherever the sources are. Okay. Wonderful evening, Yidden. Tzlach on your tests and on your learning.
This is a bigger thing.
And again, this is only mamish just to refresh your memory and jog some memories of some opinion,
This is very big.
jog your memories of some concepts and ideas, and hopefully help you do your own chazara on your test. Wonderful evening, Yidden.